We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. I am, of course, continuing with the positional previews for the 2024-2025 Iowa Hawkeye football squad. Hopefully, I'm able to get to every position. Last year, I was unable to. As this is, I believe this is my second or third year officially doing YouTube, and it's much more organized with regards to creating Iowa Hawkeye content. Like I said in previous videos, I did Facebook live videos, and back in the day, me and Cavante Martin Manley recorded episodes, even did Facebook Live. I don't know if some of you guys remember that, but literally, I was able to get Cavante Martin Manley to hop on. Now, just a little side note on that. Honestly, and I've said this before, really, he was just kind of the eye candy, for lack of a better way of saying it, the individual that everybody knew. He had obviously played for the Iowa Hawkeyes, but for me personally, I believe that he towed too close to the line, and I told him that multiple times. I said, in the end, Iowa fans and sports fans do, and most people in general do want to hear legitimately what you have to say. Now, I'm not saying you have to crap on the football players, but I don't think, but at the same time, you can give an honest assessment. But I don't think that Cavante, towards when we started recording content, I don't think that he really was paying that much attention to Iowa football. Certainly not as intently as I was. And ultimately he was not that interested. But I digress. Maybe I'll tell a video or do a video talking about that experience down the line. We'll see. I'm sure if I searched hard enough, because Facebook's always putting Facebook memories, I'm sure I could find some of the videos that me and Cavante did together. We definitely did quite a few, and we recorded podcast episodes and put them on there. I was just starting out, and I as I've said in the past, Cavante really was just interested in his t-shirt business, which was fine. But that's just what it was. So I say all that to say that I have begun to focus this much more and plan it out much more now that it's organized and put onto YouTube, and there's consistency behind it, and it's going to be on one platform for sure. Because in the past, when I did it, I would put it on Facebook Live, or I'd put it on Apple Podcasts, or I'd put it on Audacity or something like that. But what gets in the way for me is, of course, time. Even when I plan it out in advance, ultimately, I only have so much time. This is not my career job or anything like that, as you guys well know. And so there's sacrifices that I have to make. So I'm going to do my best to do all the positions. If there's not enough time, as far as kind of what I've been doing, which is one position each week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one video where I preview multiple positions in one video. That way I can just knock it out, be done with it, and it'll be completed. And that will be that. Now, of course, like I said, I will try to keep it as it is, which is one direct video for each position group. Thus far, we've done quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends. And now we're going to be previewing the Iowa wide receiver group. So as you guys can tell, I'm focusing on the offense. Then I'll move to the defense. We have offensive line remaining. When we get to the defense, maybe I will combine some groups as opposed to not having enough time and literally in one video previewing the defensive line, the linebackers. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do like defensive line and linebackers in one video, and then safeties and cornerbacks, aka the DBs, in another video. It's a little bit easier to do that for the defense as opposed to the offense. All right, guys, and without further ado, let's get into this. As I said, we're going to be previewing the Iowa wide receiver room. Now, initially, this is probably, and honestly, this has probably been the case for the last couple of years. The Iowa wide receiver group is the most interesting group to me because they always, and for the last couple of years, they've had the most to prove. There's guys that are emerging, and the wide receiver group is probably the most exotic, attractive position with talent, speedsters. It's the playmaking position. I know technically the quarterback room and even the tight ends and the running backs can be that too. But to me, when I think of playmakers, the position groups that come to mind would be wide receivers, one, quarterbacks, but in a different way, and then running backs, and again in a different way because the rest, some of the responsibilities are different. But the wide receivers, their ability to make big plays and make things happen in the open field directly impact the offense and the production of the wide receiver room. And again, I guess you could say this for the running backs too, but ultimately, you guys know what I'm saying. The wide receiver group is you see it in the NFL. That's why even in the NFL, some of the biggest ego guys, the guys with the most confidence, the most pizzazz and personality, they play wide receiver. So ultimately, what interests me on top of that with this group is I believe that there's a lot of talent. And I've told you guys for the past 2 years now that a common misconception that a lot of Iowa fans and really people who don't pay attention to Iowa have is that Iowa, the reason why they're so bad offensively is because they don't recruit the wide receiver room well. And it's just absolutely false according to the recruiting rankings. If you look at the recruiting rankings, and I'm going to show you guys again, I like to do it every single time because every time I do a video, there's new people watching the video, and it's a great opportunity to abate the misconception that is there around the Iowa wide receiver room. And I think a lot of Iowa fans have maybe assumed this in an attempt to not be honest with themselves about the issues and the ineptness of Brian Ferentz. In all honesty, the Iowa wide receiver room for the last couple of years has actually been better recruited, if you look at the recruiting rankings, than Iowa's running back room. Now, it's probably close, but Iowa landed, just to put it in context, and like I said, I'm going to show you guys this, and then, of course, I'm going to pull up some of the recruiting profiles, and I'm going to focus it on the guys that are currently on the roster. I don't want to I have a tendency to delve into the past. But Iowa, just to put it into context for you, contextualize, Iowa has landed in the past 5 years, okay, 4 or 5 years, Keegan Johnson, who is a consensus 4-star wide receiver out of the state of Nebraska. Has he ended up being what everybody thought he was going to be? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, he had some production at Iowa. Last year at Kansas State, we saw a lot of the same. And I wish he had stayed at Iowa, because if ultimately he decided to go to Kansas State, a school that's very similar to Iowa in almost every facet in how they play and their style, he probably was just better off staying at Iowa. And then ultimately, Tim Lester was going to be here, and he would have had a chance to show what he could do with Tim Lester. In that same recruiting class, they landed Arland Bruce, who was a high 3-star, 4-star by all, I believe, by multiple recruiting services. He was indeed a 4-star wide receiver. 247 Sports. I don't believe On3 was quite developed yet, but he was a 4-star by the end of it by On3, because the guy had phenomenal production in high school, and he was able to show by playing at Olathe West or North or whatever in the state of Kansas. When he transferred to Ankeny High School with Brody Brecht, he was able to show that he could produce at multiple schools, at multiple levels, playing in 2 different states' highest levels. Now, they're very similar states in that they were in the Midwest, but nonetheless. And then in that same class, Iowa also landed Brody Brecht. I mean, this was no joke. One of the best on paper wide receiver recruiting hauls that Iowa has had in 20 years. Unfortunately, it did not live up to hype, and this is a perfect example that recruiting rankings are not the end-all be-all, especially with regards to Iowa football. But still, it illustrates the misconception that is Iowa only lands 2-star or unranked wide receiver. It's just false. Okay. And there's even guys after that have been high 3-star, 4-star wide receivers that Iowa has landed. So let's just get right to it. I want to show you guys so we can move past it here. All right, guys. So I have 247 Sports pulled up here. Iowa does not have any wide receivers committed in the current class, but they are in the top 2 to land 4-star wide receiver out of the state of Illinois, Terrence Smith. Okay. So let's just go back the last couple of recruiting services so you guys can see. This past year, and this is good for me to touch upon it because, of course, I'm going to talk about the newcomers that Iowa has landed. Last year's recruiting class, Iowa landed 6'4", 6'5" Reese Vanderzee, who is a high 3-star out of the state of Iowa. Ultimately, it came down to Iowa and Iowa State, and he eventually chose Iowa. And I think this was in large part to Iowa having a solid relationship with former Central Leon players, such as Zach Lutmer, who appeared in the Iowa 2 deeps, their most recent 2 deeps. And they landed Grease something. I'm blanking on what his last name is, but he's a preferred walk-on. If I pull up this, I'm sure he'll pull up here because he was rated in the state of Iowa. Let's see here. There's DJ Bonneman, Graham Eben. Okay. Safety. So Iowa landed 6'5", high 3-star Reese Vanderzee. And they also landed high 3-star, 2 points away from being a 4-star, 88 rating, KJ Parker. And ultimately, it came down to Iowa and Cincinnati for his commitment, as a lot of schools saw him as a DB, but still, okay. And 88, guys, if you go back to the 2010s, 2011, 2012, 13, Iowa would be lucky to be in the conversation to even get an official visit from guys like this, let alone landing guys like this. Okay. There were a few years there, especially when Iowa was under Ken O'Keefe and new offensive coordinator Greg Davis, where they were landing 2-star wide receivers consistently across the board. Okay. So that's just last year's class. All right. And I will talk more about Reese Vanderzee and KJ Parker later. They both come from great high schools. I think they're both going to be successful at Iowa. And we will talk about them moving forward. 2023, Iowa landed high 3-star, 4-star by On3, Alex Mata. Okay. Out of the state of Iowa. Iowa, quite frankly, is very lucky that in back-to-back recruiting classes, they were able to land wide receivers, talented wide receivers out of the state of Iowa. That does not happen very often. They landed 6'5", high 3-star, 87, Dayton Howard. And they also landed out of Jesuit, one of the best high schools in the entire country in Florida, this dude had impressive offers and would have been rated higher had he went to a school that passed the ball more. 86. Okay. Very solid recruiting haul there. Let's go to 2022. Iowa lands Jacob Bostic, 87, who unfortunately he decided to go elsewhere. I wish that he had stayed for one more year and been willing to give Iowa's new offensive coordinator a shot. I really do. And I was always high on this kid. I remember when I did his recruiting video profile, got a nice little retweet from him and his dad. So I wish him the best. I do wish that he had stayed at Iowa for one more year. 6'3", 170-pound track stars do not grow on trees. And this guy hit the transfer portal and committed to Texas A&M. Okay, on a legit scally. Okay, we're not talking walk-on or anything. He was a legit scally. Now, the transfer rating that 247 Sports gave him was at 86. You guys can see there. And then Iowa also landed. Actually, I think he might have been the only one in that recruiting class. He was. Because this was the COOF year and or the year after the major COOF year. And quite frankly, Iowa was lucky to land him. And he had some nice offers coming out of high school, Big Ten West schools. This is 2021. This is probably the best recruiting haul that Iowa had in 20 years. Keegan Johnson, 4-star wide receiver out of Nebraska. Iowa beat out multiple Power 5 schools, Nebraska, Missouri, SEC, Big Ten, across the board. His dad, I believe, played at Nebraska. And then his brother was playing at Wyoming. Let's see if he decided to transfer out of Kansas State. And even his transfer rating, he was considered a 4-star. Arland Bruce, 4-star, ended up being a 4-star. Okay. Offers from Oklahoma State, handful of others as well. And then Iowa landed 6'4", Brody Brecht out of the state of Iowa. Now, looking back at this, the state of Iowa, as I continuously say, is year after year improving in its talent output from the state of Iowa. I've said in previous videos that the state of Iowa used to be lucky to have 5 Power 5 level guys, scholarship level guys, or Power 4. Now would be Power 4. Nowadays, each class has 10 to 20 Power 4 guys, if not more sometimes. Now, of course, it didn't work out with Brody Brecht. He ended up choosing to play baseball. Maybe if Iowa's offense was better, he would have been more excited about playing football. And to tell you guys the truth, when he committed to Iowa, I believe I said that my inclination was that he was going to choose baseball, because when you see guys that play multiple sports, what ends up happening is a guy like Brody Brecht When he plays football, of course, he's a great athlete. But that same athleticism, when applied to baseball, he is that much better. Okay. Basketball and football are the dominant sports in America. So the competition is that much higher. You see this all the time. You see guys that play football or basketball, and then they play a second sport, and they're better in the second sport and have more of a future in the second sport because they are able, their athletic gifts are more valuable in the second sport than they are for football or basketball, or more rare, shall I say. So anyways, guys, that is that. Okay. I just wanted to show you guys once and for all that Iowa has recruited the wide receiver position just fine. Okay. And any lack of production that the Iowa offense has had, or Iowa wide receiver group has been due to the wide receivers coach and or the offensive coordinator, lack of. I personally believe that it was both. I think Kelton Copeland recruited well, but if you look at his resume, he had some experience as a wide receiver, but I believe he had more experience coaching running backs. You know what? I'm going to take a look at it real quick because I'm actually interested to see. It's been a while since I looked. So just as a reminder, this was Kelton Copeland's coaching history, wide receivers at Iowa from dating back to 2017, Northern Illinois wide receiver, starting 2016, running backs, wide receivers. So he actually did have a lot of experience coaching wide receivers. So I take that back. But nonetheless, and I think this is a good opportunity to pull up John Budemeyer, who Iowa selected to be their wide receivers coach. Now, I think they could have found somebody better. And I said going back to the coaching search that it was kind of difficult to say what they were going to do here because some schools and teams allow their offensive coordinator a lot of leeway in deciding who is a part of the staff. It depends on how much involvement the school admin and athletic director want to be involved in the process. Now, ultimately, they have to be involved somewhat, but so I thought Tim Lester might choose one of his own guys. John Budemeyer, of course, Iowa has had him on staff for a little while now as an analyst, which I think was a good use of an analyst position. This guy played at Wisconsin. He's definitely familiar with football. But I do think that they could have found somebody with more experience at the wide receiver position coaching it. And they could have found somebody, as far as a resume goes, that was better specifically at coaching wide receivers. With that said, do I think it's possible that John Budemeyer can be successful? Yeah. I mean, the guy obviously knows football. He knows offense. And good coaches are good coaches, okay? And they know how to get what they need to out of players. I can't see here. So prior to his promotion to quarterbacks coach, prior to the 2018 season, Budemeyer served as a quality control assistant for 2 seasons and spent 2015 as graduate assistant with Wisconsin's quarterbacks. In 2017, Alex Hornibrook threw for 2,644 yards and 25 tubs, second most in Wisconsin history. Let's see. He was a graduate assistant at Pitt. See what else he's done. Budemeyer spent 6 seasons at Wisconsin, including the final 3 as quarterbacks coach. He also served as a quality control assistant and graduate assistant with the Badgers. Budemeyer joined the Iowa staff from Colorado State, where he served as offense coordinator and quarterbacks coach in 2021. So most of his experience is coaching quarterbacks, and him being offense coordinator is definitely awesome. Okay, I'm not saying it's not. Now, obviously you need to still have production, but in 2023, the Hawkeyes won 10 games, including their Final Four, yada, yada. John Budemeyer was elevated to wide receivers coach in February 2024 after serving as the senior special assistant to the head coach in 2023. So here is his coaching resume. It remains to be seen if he's going to be a good recruiter. Okay. I'm sure if I looked hard enough, I could find how he's recruited at Wisconsin and at Colorado State. That was something that Kelton Copeland did very well. Okay. Not just with the wide receivers, but multiple position groups. Kelton Copeland did an excellent job in the area that he was given, which was he occasionally went to Florida. He recruited Missouri, Kansas, that area, which is why he's now at the University of Kansas, because he has really strong ties in that area as a recruiter, and does have a good resume of recruiting well. Now, have all the guys that he landed ended up being super productive at Iowa? Again, we talked about it. Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce. It was kind of up and down. And I think across the board, if you look at Iowa's offense the last 5 years, that's what it's going to be, up and down. You're not going to see one guy that was super statistically solid. The last offensive guys that I can think of that were solid statistically and improved across their time at Iowa would be maybe Nate Stanley, Brandon Smith, Mir Smith-Marset, Tyler Goodson. That's about it. Okay. Otherwise, it really was a roller coaster. So this is where he has coached, and I think it's important to review John Budemeyer because he is the wide receivers coach for Iowa. And a lot of how this group does is going to depend on his ability to coach that position. So he's a graduate assistant, and he was offensive coordinator 2016 to 2017. So I'm sure that that was a temporary thing. So let's see. He joined Chris at Wisconsin in 2015 as graduate assistant, working with quarterbacks, as there was no official position coach. He was shifted to a quality control assistant the next season, continuing to coach the quarterbacks. When the NCAA approved the hiring of a 10th assistant coach, Budemeyer was officially promoted to quarterbacks coach. Now you guys can really see why Paul Chryst was linked to the job at Iowa, because of course Budemeyer's there. In 2018, Budemeyer's starting quarterback was Alex Hornibrook. Under Budemeyer's coaching, Hornibrook dropped to 13 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, with his passer rating failing 16 points. But he also set a single season record under him. So, you have to be careful with Wikipedia, not all the information. So I don't know how accurate that is. In 2019, Jack Cohn was named quarterback. He threw 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. After transferring to Notre Dame in 2021, Cohn threw for 25 tubs, only 7 INTs, and 400 more yards under quarterback coach Tommy Rees. In 2020, Budemeyer's quarterback was blue chip recruit Graham Mertz. So that obviously shows that he can recruit somewhat well. Mertz threw for 9 touchdowns and 5 INTs. So I think he was... No, he definitely was the offensive coordinator for 1 year, it looks. So that's that. All right, guys, that's Paul Chris. John Budemeyer. My final note on John Budemeyer is this. Okay. Yes, he has been an offense coordinator at a high level school in Wisconsin, albeit temporarily, but he was. And he was an offense coordinator at Colorado State for one season. But to tell you the truth, he does not have a ton of positional history as a coach. I mean, really, it's just 2016 to 2020. That's a couple of years, or to 2021. All right. And if Budemeyer was this spectacular coach, you would see this gradual incline. Rather, what you see is he's at Wisconsin. He takes a dip down going to Colorado State, albeit he does take an offense coordinator job, which isn't bad. That's still a good job to have. So I guess depending on how you look at it, it could be a slight step up, if not kind of a lateral change. Then he comes to Iowa, where he is a quality control, or he's an assistant. Okay. He's not a positional coach. He's an assistant. And then he's elevated to wide receiver coach. So to me, it's kind of up and down. And if a guy is a stud coach, you'll see kind of an upward trajectory. Now, just because it's like this doesn't mean that he's not a good coach, but I'll just put it to you this way. There's a lot left on the table. We need to see. It's very nearly impossible to say with any sort of confidence how successful he's going to be as wide receiver coach. Okay. And that's where I will end it. I think he has the knowledge. He's been there before. He played football at a high level, and he has some tutelage under some solid coaching staff in Paul Chryst. I know Paul Chryst dipped down a little bit towards the end, but time will tell. But in order for me to have any sort of confidence, I would need more to see more of an upward trajectory. You know, he's somewhere as a graduate assistant, then he takes offense coordinator position at Colorado State, then he takes an offense coordinator position at Wisconsin, or I don't know, like a Purdue or whatever it is. He takes a step up, and then he takes the offense coordinator position at Iowa. You know, that to me is a gradual incline. All right, let's take a look at the wide receivers, shall we? This is, let's see here. This is from 247 Sports, looking at the wide receiver group. A big note, of course, is Caleb Brown, yet another example of Iowa's ability to recruit the wide receiver position well. Caleb Brown was a top 100 wide receiver coming out of high school, albeit he played running back primarily at St. Rita in the state of Illinois. But again, another example of Iowa having plenty on paper talent at the wide receiver position. They lose Nico Reganey. They also lost, let's see here. Nico Reganey was Iowa's leading receiver in 2023 with 31 catches for 255 yards. Caleb Brown was Iowa's leading receiver in yards per game with 19.2. Yes, you read that right. Iowa's best wide receiver averaged 19.2 yards per game last year. Not great. After the season, Iowa parted ways with Iowa wide receiver coach Kelton Copeland, and the Hawkeyes promoted internally with hiring John Budemeyer to take over as the wide receivers coach. Iowa loses Ragaini, aka Reganey, Deontay Vines, and Jacob Bostic. So that is Iowa's biggest issue. Because of their lack of offensive production, they have not been able to develop the wide receiver room. And as I alluded to at the beginning of the video, the wide receiver position tends to attract guys with big egos. Okay. And so that is a position that if you're having issues, you're going to see a lot of turmoil and turnover. Guys are not going to be patient and stay there because it is a production position. Okay. You need production. And you directly see that with how many guys have transferred out of the program. Guys that Iowa has been unable to develop all the way through, which is very unfortunate. So even though the talent is there on paper, ultimately it's very hard to judge how good these guys were or were not because one, the offense sucked, and two, we don't know if Kelton Copeland was good at developing said talent once they got to the University of Iowa. In the spotlight, Caleb Brown. The former four-star wide receiver had a lot of expectations coming into his first year at Iowa. By the way, guys, I was completely correct about Caleb Brown. Last year, I told you guys in my preview that I expected Iowa to not have him be a starter, for him to see limited reps and to have to earn it on the roster, only for him to see his snap count increase at the middle point of the season and then eventually become a starter. And sure enough, sure as the day is here, he was a starter. That's exactly how it played out. I know how Iowa does things. I know how Kirk Ferentz does things. And I'm not saying it's wrong that they make guys earn it, but, I mean, there is something to be said. Even if a guy is still raw in his talent, if you see the talent's there's something to be said about just putting him out there and so that you can get him to develop as fast and quickly as possible. It wasn't until the November 4th matchup against Northwestern in Chicago that Brown got his first reception. And it came at a key time in the fourth quarter when Iowa needed to get points on the scoreboard to win. Then things started to click for Brown more as he finished the final 6 games of the season with 22 catches for 250 yards and a tub, and was the clear number 1 option for Iowa on the perimeter. Now, Brown will be the guy from day one. It's likely that Brown will have to miss the regular season opener, not finale, against Illinois State after being charged for an OWI earlier this summer. However, once his suspension is lifted, Iowa will look to use Brown early and often in the passing game. Brown got a head start at Ohio State, but he wasn't a wide receiver in high school. He was a running back and showed plenty of promise with his ability to make plays in the open field and make plays after the catch. Brown was second on the team amongst wide receivers in yards after the catch with 99, as Nico Reganey led the way with 129. Reganey also had a lower receiving percentage at 41.9, while Brown's percentage was 60. I'm not sure what receiving percentage means exactly. Reganey got more targets than Brown, but the Hawkeyes were able to use Brown more consistently when he was in, and it has been said before that those inside the program believe that Tim Lester's offense is a perfect match for Brown. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about in this video. We sure are hearing a lot, and I told you guys that this would happen. This is why I've made multiple videos tempering your expectations. The Iowa media, without fail, always pumps out all this propaganda on how much different, how much better, how much improved Iowa's offense is going to be. So they get you guys excited for the football season. Can you blame them? It's not honest, but it's what they do. Remember when we heard about Kirk 2.0, Kirk 2.1, Kirk 3.0? Remember that? Only for Kirk to take a massive step back in his thoughts about the offense and his direction with his son as the offensive coordinator. I mean, literally, when Brian Ferentz was coordinator, we saw each year the offense become more and more and more restrictive. So every year we hear this from the Iowa media. New and improved offense. Tim Lester's perfect match. They have new route concept. They have new route tree. I hope it's all true. I do. I really hope it's true. Believe that. Believe that. I hope to the good Lord above that it is true. We will see. If history is any indicator, it will not be true. I hate to say it, guys, but I do hope it's true. Quote, he's a good skill guy that way. He's had the ability and skill, Kirk Ferentz said of Brown. Now I think he's starting to learn how to play, and each of those guys must be nice to know what it feels like to be a good player. He's starting to experience that. I never had that experience as a player. Okay. Brown fits the mold of the type of receivers Lester had a lot of success with at Western Midge. If that can translate to Iowa City, then there is no reason why Brown should not have a big 2024 campaign. He has the ability to make plays after the catch and improved his hands as the season progressed, showing more comfort in route running and breaking down DBs. He did have 2 drops in the Citrus Bowl against Tennessee. He can be the type to take a big step forward with an improved quarterback and an offense that fits his type of play. Brown is the most talented receiver that Iowa's had in the room at this point. He's one of the most experienced too, will be a big key in helping the Hawkeyes unlock their offense this year. So how I see the Iowa wide receivers is they do have talent, but I think at least in year one, they should be used as a complementary piece. Iowa should use their depth and talent at the running back and tight end position to open up things for the wide receiver. Now, I don't know if that's Tim Lester's MO. We'll see. But that is where Iowa has the most talent. As I have alluded to in other positional preview breakdowns, if I were to rank the position groups from best to worst, the wide receiver room would be somewhere where, to me, there is talent in the room, but it's a lot of untapped talent, unmeasurable talent. It's talent that we have not been able to see for a variety of reasons. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. Was it solely Brian Ferentz? Was it these wide receivers just aren't really that good? But there is talent. If you look at on the paper, there is talent. So that is the positive. But it's hard to really, to me, the wide receiver group is the most tough to gauge and rank because of the other external factors that have played a part in the on the field performance of Iowa wide receivers. X factor, Seth Anderson. Iowa will need more from Seth Anderson this season. Anderson started off the 2024 season with a bang as he caught a long tub pass from Cade McNamara on the first drive in the regular season against Utah State. After that, his numbers started to drop off a bit. Yes, they did. Anderson finished the season with 11 catches for 150 yards and his only touchdown on the year coming in the season opener. Anderson had 42 catches for 612 yards and 8 touchdowns in his redshirt freshman year at Charleston Southern. His receiving percentage was 45.3 compared to 35% last season with 4 drops a year ago. He had 26 first downs in 2022 compared to 7 in 2023. Anderson's average depth of target during his collegiate career has been over 14 yards, so most of his routes are not on quick hitters or short routes, which will make his receiving percentage go down. Still, he has enough speed and elusiveness to start getting more routes in the short pockets while also being a threat in intermediate and deep routes. So I've said this before. He's a proven contributor. Anytime you can have over 500 yards at the Division I level, you're talented. And what my eyes tell me is he's very talented. But again, it's super hard to judge because of the ineptitude of Brian Ferentz and the Iowa offense, or I don't even know if you can call it that, of last year. And then lastly, we have Northwestern transfer Jacob Gill. He did not appear on the depth chart. We have Caden Wetschgen, who the media has been saying a lot of positive things about. Same with Iowa's offense coordinator, Tim Lester. Westgen has been extremely explosive, Lester said in the spring. There's Jacob Gill, very fast, transferred with Brendan Sullivan. And then underclassmen to watch, you have Jarriett Bowie from the state of Florida, 6'1", 200 pounds with great size, speed, and athleticism. You have Dayton Howard and Alex Mata. They both may be a year away, according to 247 Sports. Iowa needs Dayton Howard to develop. They need a big-bodied wide receiver, plain and simple. Mata is a speedster and another wideout who fits Lester's strengths on offense. Iowa also brings in two talented true freshmen in KJ Parker and Reese Vanderzee, which we discussed when I was talking about Iowa's talent earlier in this video. Here is the projected depth chart. And we did already see an updated depth chart. I was thinking of doing a video on it. I don't think I'm going to, because honestly, Kirk Ferentz, Iowa's depth chart is seldom super accurate at this point. As Kirk Ferentz even says himself, it's ever evolving, ever changing. So, but we'll use this opportunity to touch upon it, and I'll pull it up right now. So here it is, guys. Very interesting. One of the changes is, of course, having a predominantly 3 wide receiver set. So much so that this is the new way that they're doing their depth chart, rather than having 2 tight ends or 2 running back starters, or a fullback starter, as Iowa has had in the past. I mean, I guess they still have one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, it's 12. Thought there's only 11 players. Is it? No, it's 12 players. My bad. I should know that as an official. So, not sure what happened with my screen there. But I think Iowa in the past has had 2 tight ends listed rather than and only 2 wide receivers. So Jarriett Bowie, my first observation outside of the 3 wide receiver set, is the starting outside wide receiver, the X. I saw him more as a Z. I think that's probably his more natural position. But, you know, he still is 6'1". That's not bad height. As I've said in previous videos, Iowa going into this year has a lot of explosive, shifty, quick wide receivers. They don't have, the one thing that they need to develop is a true outside big-bodied threat. As some of their targets, their wide receiver targets and signees have not worked out. Brody Brecht, Jacob Bostic, some of the bigger-bodied, more natural X wide receivers have not worked out. But for now, Jarriett Bowie, as a redshirt freshman, is listed as a starter. But as I said, I think his more natural position would be at the Z, or, yeah, I would say probably the Z. The other interesting thing of note is Terrell Washington Jr. being on the depth chart. In spring, the coaches said that they were not fully making a change for him to wide receiver, that they were giving him reps there because he's talented, but really just using him out there because guys were injured, guys were out, and it was a good opportunity to get him reps out there. And I knew that that was false. Okay. There's a reason they moved him out there. He's talented. They want to get him on the field. If you look at Iowa's running back room versus their wide receiver room, there's much more of an opportunity for him to make an impact immediately at the wide receiver position. Do I think that his future is completely closed off at the running back position? No. But it looks like Iowa is gearing him more towards the wide receiver position, which I think is fine because Iowa has not really seen a ton of attrition at the running back position. The running back position, it used to be a running joke, airbag or whatever it was. I used to see that on all these Iowa message boards and articles. It used to be a running joke that Iowa had a huge issue of losing running backs to suspension or transfer and totally having the position group decimated. So nonetheless, he's there. He's on the two deeps behind Caleb Brown. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if they still utilize him at running back. Ultimately, there's not really going to be a ton of opportunities to do so. Could they use him like throughout the course of a game, like one or two plays at the running back position as a different look and a different play where there's more of a run pass option with him in the backfield? Perhaps, but the path for him to have 5 to 10 legit carries a game at the running back position is just not there for this year. And then Seth Anderson, number 1, at the slot, Caden Westjen at backup, and Dayton Howard behind him. I think this is a really solid group, guys. I really do. There's talent there. The one thing that they're missing is a true outside receiver. But we'll see what Jarriett Bowie can do. Regardless of not having that, there still is talent, there still is speed, there's still playmaking ability. So this is why I'm really looking forward to this position group, guys. And just to wrap this up, you guys can see some of the other guys. Not really any other surprises. I guess Marco Lainez being listed as the 2 was somewhat of a surprise. I don't think that that's a permanent thing. I think if game 1 started tomorrow and Cade McNamara got injured, Brendan Sullivan would be the one going in. Other than that, not really a ton of surprises. Looking at the defense and everything. So, all right, guys, final thoughts on the wide receiver room. So, throughout the video that Iowa does have talent, it's a misconception that they don't. They surprisingly still have a good amount of talent if you take into account the sheer amount of attrition that this group has had over the last couple of years. I think Caleb Brown is a true, legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Unfortunately, he's off to a bad start with OWI, but hopefully he's learned his lesson and won't make that mistake again. I've said in previous videos that it is absolutely absurd that any Iowa football player get arrested for DUI, OWI, when you take into account the sheer resources that are at their disposal as football athletes. You know how many people would be, and I said this previously, you know how many people would be willing to help Iowa football players out? You could get random people off the street to help you out and give you a ride due to their fandom of the University of Iowa. There's Uber, there's Lyft. Now, Iowa players football players actually do have money due to NIL. So now you can't use the excuse of it's just a broke college kid. So him doing that, even in the past, would have been unexcusable. And especially now, nowadays it's unexcusable. I hope he learned his lesson. I hope we don't see this again. As for his on the field talent, hopefully that is not illusions of things to come. I hope that that's just a one-off thing. We have seen previously that Iowa players, we saw Tristan Wirfs, he got an OWI. I think Alaric Jackson got an OWI, and they finished out their Iowa careers. They're playing in the NFL, doing great. So it's not, but we've also seen the opposite where this happens and guys drop down immediately. And it's a red flag of their true character and the demons that they face. So I hope that it is the former rather than the latter. Okay. The X factor, as 247 Sports said, is Seth Anderson, Caden Wetschin. But to me, really what is going to make this group is going to be Jarriett Buoy or whoever that X wide receiver is. Okay. Um, whoever is able to truly be a outside threat, a possession wide receiver. You guys know in the EA Sports game, college football, I don't know if they still have it. They just recently made a new game, obviously. But in the past, they used to have tendencies listed for players. One of them, especially for wide receiver group, is maybe this was for every offensive group, but they would have balanced, blocker, or possession. And in the X receiver, you're really looking for a possession wide receiver, a guy that definitely can. So I guess balanced, but a guy who can block when needed, but is able to move the chains, able to make big catches that nobody else can make when you're in the red zone, when you're in short yardage situations, when you need a first down, you're 3rd and 5 and you need a first down. Guys that know how to carve out space and make catches in tight windows. Okay. So Jarriett Buoy, to me, if he stays on the trajectory of being the number one X, is going to be really the guy that is the deciding factor for how good this room can be. Now, ultimately, it's going to come down to Seth Anderson and Caleb Brown. They're the two most talented receivers on the roster. And to me, what will be considered successful will be if both of them can eclipse 500 yards. If both of them can have 500 yards apiece, this will, in my eyes, be a marked improvement from what we have seen in recent years from the Iowa offense and specifically from the wide receiver group. That will be more in line with what we saw from Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith. Can you guys imagine if we had the production of, remember when Iowa fans complained about Nate Stanley days? How glad would we be? And I know a lot of people talk about this, but how glad would we be the last 2-3 years to have approaching the production of Nate Stanley, Amir Smith-Marset, and Brandon Smith? You know what I'm saying? So if those two guys, all jokes aside, if those two guys can have 500 yards apiece, this will be a successful year. On the high end, I think Caleb Brown, now because he's missing game 1 against Illinois State, a game that he could have a massive game. Now he's not going to get that opportunity. Taking that into mind, I think the high end for Caleb Brown would be around 750 yards with 5 to 8 touchdowns on the high end. On the median, what I'm expecting and what I would want to see in order to consider it successful and meeting expectations would be 5 to 700 with, I would say 3 to 6 touchdowns. I know the touchdowns are pretty much the same in both examples I gave, but touchdowns are more of a premium. Really, what I'm looking at is the yardage. I would say 5 to 7. If he gets somewhere in that range, this will be a successful season. All things being equal, and him not being injured and him not missing a ton of time. And then outside of him, if you can get 200 yards, 200 to 400 yards from Caden Wetschin and 200 to 400 yards from Jarriett Buoy, this will be a solid campaign for the Iowa wide receiver group. This is the group that is going to be the deciding factor and the measuring stick regarding the difference between Tim Lester's offense and Brian Ferentz. And just to wrap this up, nicely, again, that is going to be the predicator of Iowa moving in the correct direction, is the wide receiver production. because it was non-existent under Brian Ferentz in the latter years. And in my estimation, and I've already said it in previous videos, the talent is there to do so. Tim Lester is coming in to an offense. Yes, they are coming off a very bad year last year. But in my opinion, it is far more to do with Brian Ferentz and the philosophy of the Iowa offense and the tutelage of the Iowa offense, the coaching, than it is the actual talent of the Iowa players. So with a year of Tim Lester being the offensive coordinator, being able to teach, mentor, and get his system into place, it's not going to be perfect because it's still only year one, but the talent is there. You have a veteran offensive line. You have a veteran running back group with proven playmakers and guys that have been productive and can have monster games. In the running back room, I think you have two guys that are headed for the NFL, Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams. Definitely Caleb Johnson if he can stay healthy. The talent is there. So I don't believe that we should take it easy on Tim Lester and put forth this. We got to be careful about saying, "Oh, it's year one. Let's give him a break." No. The talent's there. Okay, am I expecting him to have his best year is year one? No. That's where I will temper expectations, but there still should be a marked improvement. The talent is there. Okay. The tools are there. So that is the only place that I'm going to temper my expectations is in Tim Lester's career at Iowa. Is it reasonable to expect him to have the most explosive year in year one? No. But it still should be productive, and it still should be a marked improvement from what we saw last year in Brian Ferentz. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash that like button and definitely smash that subscribe button. Let's get this channel to 2,000 subs. And at the very least, leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys think about the wide receiver room. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and facts are feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.